Goeiemorgen mense. Okay, so we're at project lawn number 2 here. This is going to be an LM section. I just want to go through the basics with you guys on this today. Okay, so this little section, let's have a look here. That's Sasha. We've got about 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a bit, so about 24 odd square meters. Very small section. As you can see here, we tested the theory of putting down some LM grass here, and it grows right up until against the wall, no problem in the shade, versus the rest of the kikuyu down there. But yeah, the LM took in here very, very nicely, and we had this all seasons evergreen shady mix, horrible stuff in here, and we've put down about 3 100 square meter packets worth of seed here over about the last 8 months, possibly even a year, and nothing. So we're going to do my old faithful is LM grass. There is just enough sunlight in here that I think it'll be fine. We're going to keep it at a higher height of cut, and yeah, let me show you how to do this. Right, so all the evergreen shady mix has already been pulled out here, and the soil has been turned. What we're going to do now is add good old bone meal, and that is it as a basic soil preparation. We'll be putting down some Oro soil as well down after the sod has gone down, but the bone meal is basically, we're just going to mix this into the soil. But you've got to always remember that bone meal is going to encourage your dogs digging here, so you need to just be careful of that as well, or just be aware of it. Once it's been watered in and that smell is less attractive for the dogs, then you will be okay thereafter. Okay, so as you can see, I've put down a bit of this bone meal. It is less than the recommended rate, but you don't need a lot of the stuff anyhow. We're going to now take a rake. You're going to go over this again with the rake. Just mix some of this in, loosen up some of the soil, try and get rid of a few more stones if you find them here and there. And yeah, just the primary objective though is just to try and mix this in a little bit so that it's not sitting in clumps. And then we're going to wet it. Straight after we've wetted, we're going to let that settle a little bit. We're going to start laying sod, and once we've laid the sod, then we'll put on the other goodies. Okay, so you can see I've just raked in a small section. You can tell it goes in quite nicely. When you do this, you just minimize that chance of your dogs wanting to dig up the stuff, and also then it's not so clumped up and bunched up under the root system, and it will also then be easier for the microbes to start eating it up and digesting it. And just by the way, when the microbes do eat it and digest it, it makes it much simpler and easier for the plant to absorb, so you make it more useful. Okay, bone meal's raked in. Now we're going to water when it decides it wants to come through. And this is not a watering, this is just a wetting of the ground underneath. You just want to, if you ever notice on your car's windshield when droplets of water connect, they kind of stream together. This is the effect that you're going to now create by putting a little bit of water under the sod, and then again later when you water the sod in, that's just going to help get water to around the root level. And just another objective is don't let any pooling or puddling happen. Just get it slightly damp, and that's good enough. What you're going to want to do is start in a corner and then work your way back. Basically try not to be on the actual wet soil as much as possible, although that's pretty impossible in most cases, but at least start with any of your neater corners. So for us, this is a nice hard edge here, so this is where we're going to start, and we're going to work up into a soft bevel against that side of the walkway. So just to start here, you first need to find the end of your sod and then get it in the right place, and you really need to tuck it as deeply in as possible. That overlap is not going to work for us, so we need to pull it back. So what we'll do is get your hands right under the sod, because you don't want to damage it too much, and then get it in until it's sort of sitting like this, and then tuck that back. And then just feel for any abnormalities, work your way down, and then tuck in the sods. You always want to make sure you get off to a good start, because then the rest will be a lot easier. Now we can get these all lined up against one another back to back. We can cut off any edges that are a little bit funny like this, or replant them in different areas that might have holes later on. But the objective now is that this is nice and neat. It's up against the wall. It'll look tidy. We get down the second sod, we're going to make sure that it sits as neatly as that one does, not only against the wall, but also up against its neighboring sod. Get your fingers in there, feel around where you can feel these little gaps, and pull them closer towards one another. And this is something very important to remember with alem grass, is that alem grass can't be top dressed as heavily as kikuyu. So these little gaps that you find here, you fix them on install. If you feel like braving using a roller, you can do that as well, but there's not really a need for it unless you've got very uneven ground. If you prepare the soil properly, like what we have here, and you install it neatly, you're not going to have too much of an uneven ground. And when the sod is actually grown in and rooted, then you can start worrying about maybe doing a light top dress, very light, so that it doesn't cover the actual rooting nose, and then maybe you can roll it after that. That's us off to a good start. Okay, just another point. It is perfectly fine for you to stand on the sod while you're busy walking around, because you have to give it a little bit of a trample after you've installed it anyway. And it's better to rather be on the grass when rolling all the sod out as opposed to the wet ground, because you're going to just be dragging mud everywhere and it sticks to your shoes and all sorts of other gross stuff. So stand on your grass, it's perfectly fine. Okay, as you're going along, you can just trample on all the lumps and bumps. So this does need to be done as best as possible, but with alem, you're just going to be a little bit more careful. So I like to do it just by squashing it down by foot as nicely as possible before you wet it, not after you've wet it. And that is your next step. Okay, just editing the footage, I realized that we didn't talk about the fertilizers that nicely. So quite simply, with putting down any new lawn, you need a good amount of phosphorus. So you can put down something like superphosphate as well. I've chosen to use bone meal, and then thereafter you just need to make sure that you've got a balanced fertilizer down. Something like 232 if you're going to use granular is perfectly fine. You can use a high nitrogen fertilizer if you feel you want to just boost things along, but your primary objective is obviously root growth and to get the roots established. Otherwise the plant will just die before anything else happens. You don't want surface growth and a distraction from root growth. Also, for me, what I've chosen to do is just to put down a liquid fertilizer, because then I've got immediate action on the leaf surface and at root level. Plus with the RO soil, it's a very quick absorption of the nutrients. So if there's anything dodgy with that sod that we purchased, just side of the road special sod, then liquid fertilizers is our best bet to make sure that stuff really gets a good start. Okay, so you know that I've used this before. This is called RO Soil. It is a wetting agent. Now I particularly like this product. You can see I've been using it for a while because it helps with the distribution of nutrients in the soil. So ideally you want to put this down before you put down any other fertilizers, etc. The RO Vital has a very good balance of the macronutrients, but it has all the micronutrients and humates and iron and all the rest of it in there, plus a little bit of wetting agent too, to do everything to let the plant grow well from the beginning. Because you've got sod, you already know that you have a leaf surface, but you know that you also don't have a root structure that's developed properly, that is connecting with your existing soil. It's all just sitting inside the sod. So your best advantage is to give that which is still alive a fighting chance first, in my opinion. So put down a foliar application of your fertilizer of choice. Let that do some work immediately to sort of revive this grass from all the stress of being cut out and being turned into sod. Give it a bit of a break, give it a bit of a breather, and then in about 2 weeks we'll come back with nitrogen and another application of RO Vital by themselves without RO Swole. You won't need it again for about another 6 weeks, and that's what we'll put down here. Okay, so I decided not to go with such a heavy dosage, but I have gone 1.5 times the recommended maintenance dosage of the RO Soil, and I've gone with 1.5 times the maintenance dosage of RO Vital, and that should be sufficient. And then in about 2 weeks we'll put down only about a half rate of NC32. It's not necessary to put down too much nitrogen thereafter. But before we even do that, I'm saying 2 weeks, we're going to check to see if these roots have rooted before we put down any nitrogen. And just while you're at it, you might as well give your grass the best possible chance and trim a couple of branches off if you've got these big trees and what have you. Try and hollow out the center of it if you can, because then it still looks nice and neat from the outsides. But in our case, we just had a couple of low-hanging ones, and that made a significant difference to what we now see at ground level. Okay, so we've got our little mixture here. We're now going to apply it to the lawn nice and evenly as evenly as possible. And remember, with these water-soluble type products, not all of them, but these in particular, you can use a hose end sprayer as well. We don't have one here today, so we're just going to use a standard sprayer and then water it in deeply afterwards. So I'm just going to apply the product as best as possible, and luckily the color of the product does allow you to see where you have already sprayed, so your chances of messing up are not very high. Then we're going to give it maybe 15 or 20 minutes. You can give it an hour before you water it in, but for the sake of the RO soil, we're going to give it 15 or 20 minutes and then we'll water it in. Okay, so I realize this video might be getting a bit too long, so I'm just going to cut it at this. I'll catch you guys up on progress as and when I'm back here. And yeah, thanks again for watching. Please like and subscribe, and make sure to check out my website as well. Thanks. Cheers.